The morning Derek walked into my building, I was on the 32nd floor reviewing quarterly projections. My assistant knocked on my glass door, stepped inside, and handed me a printed resume with a paper-clipped headshot, standard procedure for executive-level candidates. I do things the old way. I like holding paper in my hands. I like feeling the weight of a decision before I make it. I looked down, and there he was. Derek Allen Caldwell, my ex-husband, the man who sat across from me at our kitchen table 3 years ago and told me, calm as still water, that he was in love with someone else, that he had been for a while, that the marriage was over. I stared at his headshot for a long moment. Same square jaw, same thick hair, a little more silver at the temples now, same confident half smile, the one he used to flash at rooms full of people like he already knew he was the most important person in it. My assistant was still standing there. "Should I reschedule him?" she asked carefully, and I looked up from that paper. "No," I said. "Put him in conference room B at 2 o'clock and tell him the CEO will be conducting this interview personally." She blinked. "He doesn't know it's you, does he?" I set the resume down on my desk, face up, and smiled. "Not yet." My name is Victoria Caldwell. Most people call me Tori. I am the founder and CEO of Caldwell and Associates, a mid-sized financial consulting firm based in Chicago, Illinois. We currently manage over 40 corporate clients across 12 states, employ 93 people, and last year we cleared $11 million in revenue. I'm 41 years old. I own my office, I own my car, I own every single chair in my building. And I want to tell you how I got here, because none of it looked like this 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I was sitting on the bathroom floor of a house I thought was mine, crying into a towel so my son wouldn't hear me through the wall. This is that story, the whole story, from the very beginning. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, middle child. My mother was a school librarian. My father drove long-haul trucks for most of my childhood, which meant he was home for maybe 10 days a month, and when he was there, the house felt different, louder, fuller, a little warmer. I was the kind of kid who was always watching, always paying attention. While my older sister Melissa chased boys and my younger brother Cody played video games, I was reading, doing math problems for fun, making little spreadsheets on my dad's computer to track our household grocery spending because I found it genuinely interesting. My mother used to say, "Tori, you were born with a calculator in your chest instead of a heart." She meant it lovingly, I think. I got a full scholarship to the University of Illinois for business and finance. I was 21 years old, 5'4", wearing the same 3 blazers on rotation, and absolutely certain I was going to take the financial world apart with my bare hands. That's where I met Derek. He was in my economics of corporate finance class junior year. Tall, funny, the kind of confident that feels like warmth before you learn to tell the difference. He sat next to me on the first day because, he told me later, I looked like the smartest person in the room and he figured sitting next to me would help his grade. That was Derek's whole personality, actually. Always finding the shortcut, always calculating proximity to power. I didn't see that then. Then I just saw a man who made me laugh and looked at me like I was something rare. We dated for 2 years, got engaged at 24, married at 25. And I want you to understand, I loved him. I did, fully, without reservation. The way you love something when you're young enough to believe that love is enough to sustain anything. The early years were good. We moved to Chicago right after the wedding because Derek had a job offer at a marketing firm downtown, and I was flexible. I was doing freelance financial consulting at the time, building a client base from my laptop while we figured out our life. We were young and broke and happy. We lived in a two-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. We cooked dinner together most nights, or tried to. We argued about stupid things, whose turn it was to do laundry, whether to get a dog. We had a tradition of Saturday morning walks along the lakefront, coffee in hand, talking about the future like it was something we were building together. For a long time, I believed we were. Our son, Mason, was born when I was 28. He was 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and he came into the world furious, screaming, red-faced, absolutely offended at the inconvenience of being born. He was the best thing that had ever happened to me on the worst night of my life. 31 hours of labor. I will not elaborate. After Mason, things shifted in the quiet way things shift. Not all at once, but slowly, like tectonic plates, until one day you look up and you're standing somewhere you don't fully recognize. Derek got promoted twice at his firm. He was good at what he did. Charming, strategic, always the person who worked the room at corporate events. I supported all of it. I was proud of him, genuinely. But somewhere in those years, my work started growing too. Slowly at first, then faster. What started as freelance consulting became a small registered LLC. I brought on my first employee, my college friend Dana, who is now my VP of operations, and then another. We started landing bigger corporate clients. I worked ridiculous hours. I was up at 5, on calls by 6, running on coffee and ambition and something deep in my chest that I couldn't quite name. Derek started to change when he noticed. Not visibly at first. He'd make little comments. "You're always on your laptop. When's the last time we actually had dinner without you checking your phone?" Mason asked me why Mommy works more than Daddy. That last one stung. It was designed to. I scaled back. I told myself it was balance. I told myself I was choosing my marriage. I told myself a lot of things that I have since stopped telling myself. Looking back now, I think Derek was not upset that I worked too much. I think Derek was upset that I was becoming someone he hadn't planned for. The year Mason turned 5, Derek was passed over for a senior director position at his firm. He was devastated. I sat with him that whole evening, rubbed his back, told him he was talented and capable and that something better was coming. I meant every word. That same month, I landed the biggest client of my career at the time, Hargrove Financial Group, a regional bank with 7 offices. It was a 2-year consulting contract worth more than Derek's annual salary. I remember the night I told him. I came home giddy. Actually giddy. I had champagne, I called my mother, I sat down across from Derek at the kitchen table, and I told him the news with this huge smile on my face. He said, "Wow." Just wow. Not congratulations, not I'm proud of you, just one flat word that landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. I told myself he was still hurting from his own disappointment. I gave him grace. I poured the champagne anyway and sat there pretending the night was a celebration while he scrolled through his phone across from me, barely present. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it then. Over the next year, Derek became someone I had to tiptoe around. He was irritable, distant. He stopped reaching for my hand when we walked. He stopped asking about my work. He went out with colleagues on Friday evenings and started coming home later and later. And when I'd ask about it, he'd say I was being paranoid, controlling, that I needed to trust him. I want to tell you something that I have said in therapy and that I now say freely. I knew. I didn't know. I didn't have proof, but something in me, that calculator in my chest that my mother teased me about, had already done the math and arrived at an answer I wasn't ready to accept. So I kept not accepting it. For months. It was a Tuesday in October. Mason was at a sleepover at his best friend Jackson's house. I had worked late and come home to an empty kitchen and leftover pasta I'd made on Sunday. I remember that detail so clearly, eating cold pasta standing over the sink at 9 at night, still in my work clothes. Derek came home around 10:30. He smelled like someone else's perfume. I want to be precise. It wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't maybe that's cologne from someone he hugged. It was unmistakable, sweet and floral and absolutely not mine. I turned around from the sink. I looked at him, and Derek Allen Caldwell, my husband of 8 years, the father of my child, the man I had built a life with, looked back at me, and instead of lying, instead of deflecting, instead of doing any of the things I had steeled myself for, he sat down, and he told me the truth. Her name was Ashley, 26 years old. She worked at a fitness studio he joined 6 months ago. He said they had been seeing each other for 4 months. He said he was in love with her. He said he was sorry, but he had been unhappy for a long time, and he felt like he couldn't breathe in our marriage, and he needed something different. He said a lot of things. I stood there at the kitchen sink with cold pasta in my hand, and I listened to every single word. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. And then I said very calmly, "You need to go stay somewhere else tonight." He looked almost surprised, like he'd expected tears, like he prepared for a fight. I was not going to give him either. "Tonight?" he asked. "Right now," I said. "Take what you need for a few days. We can talk about the rest when I'm ready." He grabbed a bag, and he left. And I walked to our bathroom, closed the door, sat down on the cold tile floor, and I sobbed quietly into a towel, the ugly, suffocating kind of crying that you do when something breaks in you that you didn't even know was holding everything together. I cried until I couldn't anymore, and then I sat in the quiet, and I thought, okay, what now? Divorce is not a moment. It's a process. It is paperwork and phone calls and mediators and custody agreements and asset division spreadsheets and conversations with your son that you rehearse in your head for days before you have them. Mason was 5. We sat on his bedroom floor, surrounded by Lego sets, and I told him that Mommy and Daddy loved him completely and equally and forever, and that we were going to live in 2 different houses now, but that both houses were his home. He asked if it was because he did something bad. I held that child for a long time. Derek and I agreed to joint custody, week on, week off. He moved into an apartment about 3 miles away. Ashley, I found out through mutual friends, moved in with him within 2 months of us separating. 2 months! The man told me he had been unhappy for a long time. 8 years of marriage, and 2 months after walking out of my house, he's playing house with a 26-year-old. I'm not going to pretend that didn't devastate me. It did. Every time Mason came home from Derek's apartment talking about Ashley's cooking or the movie Ashley picked, I had to go into another room and breathe through my nose for a solid minute. Grief is complicated. Betrayal grief is its own specific kind of awful. But here is what I want to tell you. I did not stay on that bathroom floor. I cried there. I earned those tears, every single one. And then I got up. The first thing I did, and I mean the very first thing before the ink on the divorce papers was even dry, was call Dana. Dana, who has been my best friend since sophomore year of college. Dana, who once drove 4 hours in a snowstorm because I called her crying. Dana, who said exactly one sentence when I told her what happened. He always had a small spirit. You just loved him big enough that you couldn't see it. I wrote that down. I still have it in a notebook on my desk. The second thing I did was make a decision. I had been running my consulting business as a small operation, strategic by choice because I'd always kept it manageable to preserve my marriage. I had kept myself small. Not just professionally, in every room Derek was in, I had quietly learned to take up less space. I was done with that. I had a company with 11 clients and 3 employees, a reputation that was growing faster than my infrastructure, and a divorce settlement that included the house, which I promptly sold because I needed capital and I needed a fresh start, and that house held memories I was not interested in paying a mortgage to visit every night. I put that money back into the business. I hired a small business attorney. I restructured the LLC. I brought on 2 senior consultants, Rachel, who had 20 years in corporate finance, and Marcus, who specialized in regulatory compliance. I signed 2 new clients in the first quarter, 3 more by midsummer. I was working 12-hour days. I was also going to therapy, running 3 miles every morning, eating food I cooked myself, and sleeping 7 hours a night because I had learned, finally in my mid-30s, that you cannot pour from a broken vessel. You have to repair yourself while you pour. Mason was my anchor. Every single week he was with me was a reminder of exactly what I was doing all of this for. I went to every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. I helped him build a Lego Millennium Falcon that took 3 weekends and nearly destroyed my sanity, and it was one of the best things I have ever done. I built, I grew, I healed. Slowly, unevenly, the way real things grow. Let me tell you what was on that resume. Derek had left his marketing firm, the one where he'd been passed over for senior director, you remember? About 8 months after our divorce. He'd gone to a smaller agency, then a startup, then another agency. He'd been hopping, which in the consulting world tells a story without you having to say a word. His most recent position had ended 4 months ago. The resume listed it as contract concluded. I have been in business long enough to know what that usually means. He was applying for a senior client strategy director position at my company, a position that paid very well, had excellent benefits, and would put him in my building on my floor reporting to my VP of operations, my best friend Dana, who absolutely knew who he was. The position had been posted publicly on 3 job boards, standard procedure. His application had gone through our online portal, been reviewed by our HR department, passed the initial screening, and made it to the executive interview round. He had made it through 3 stages of our process without anyone catching who he was. Because his ex-wife's company is now large enough that not everyone in HR has seen pictures of the CEO's personal life. When Dana brought me the resume, I want to tell you her face was a masterpiece. She placed it on my desk like it was an unexploded device. "Tori," she said. I took the resume from her. I read it top to bottom. I set it down. "Should I reject him administratively?" Dana asked. "We can cite position filled. No one would know." And I thought about it. I genuinely thought about it, the easy path. Then I thought about that kitchen, that Tuesday in October, that towel on the bathroom floor. And then I thought about this office, this floor, these views. I thought about who I had become in the years since Derek decided I wasn't enough. "No," I said. "Set the interview, conference room B, 2 o'clock. Tell him the CEO insists on conducting final round executive interviews personally," which is true. I do insist on that. That is my actual policy. Dana stared at me. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," I said. "I want to look him in the eye." The day of the interview, I woke up at 5 a.m. I ran my 3 miles along the lakefront, the city still gray and quiet and cold. I had a conversation with myself the whole way, not out loud, internally, the kind of running conversation that is part argument, part therapy, part pep talk. Why are you doing this? Because I want to. What do you want to happen? I want to look at him across a cable in my building and see who we both became. And I want him to understand, fully understand, exactly what he walked away from. And then what? and then I'll make the right decision for my company. That was the truth. That was the whole truth. I wasn't going to hire him to be petty. I wasn't going to reject him to be petty. I was going to conduct a professional interview, evaluate him fairly, and do what was right for Caldwell and Associates. But I was also going to let him figure out in real time exactly where he was standing. I got back to my apartment. I showered, I did my hair, I wore a navy suit that I had custom tailored, wore the heels, put on the single piece of jewelry I always wear for high-stakes days, a small gold bracelet my mother gave me when I graduated college. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. I looked like exactly what I am. I drove to the office. Well, Derek arrived at 1:58, 2 minutes early. He always prided himself on punctuality. I know this because my receptionist, young woman named Brianna, texted me from the front desk, "Your 2 o'clock is here. He's in the lobby." I asked her to let him wait exactly 10 minutes, not to be cruel, because I had a call I was finishing. At 2:10, I walked out of my office toward conference room B. And I should tell you, I have a corner office at the end of a long hallway, glass walls, frosted below eye level for privacy, clear above. My name is on the door, a proper brass placard, clean lettering. Victoria Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer. To get to conference room B, you walk past my office. Derek was standing near the glass wall of the conference room, facing the window with its view of Lake Michigan, his back to the hallway. Our assistant had set out water and a notepad. He was in a dark gray suit. Good suit. He always dressed well. His hands were in his pockets. I watched him from the hallway for a moment. This man. This specific man. And then I walked. He heard my heels before he turned. He turned, and the color— I want to describe this carefully because I have replayed it many times and I want to do it justice. The color left his face the way water drains from a sink, not slowly, just suddenly gone. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I walked into that conference room, set my portfolio on the table, pulled out the chair at the head of it, and sat down. "Derek," I said, "it's good to see you. Please, sit down." He sat. For several seconds, he said nothing. He was staring at me like a man trying to solve a problem he hadn't known he had. His eyes went to the door behind me, to the brass placard he would have passed in the hallway, Victoria Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer. I watched him do the math. Finally, he said, "Tori." "Victoria," I said pleasantly. "Or Miss Caldwell is fine, whichever you're more comfortable with." His jaw tightened. "I didn't know that this was my company." I nodded. "I imagine not. It was posted publicly. You went through the standard application process. 3 rounds. I opened my portfolio. You did quite well, actually. Your preliminary scores were strong." "Tori." "Victoria," I said again, still pleasant, still calm. "I understand this is a surprise. It would be for anyone. But I want to be clear with you before we begin. I conduct all final round executive interviews personally. It is my policy. And I intend to conduct yours the same way I would conduct any other. Professionally, fairly, based entirely on your qualifications." He stared at me. "You're serious?" "I'm always serious in this room," I said. "Now, tell me about your most recent role." There was a beat. And then something shifted in his face. I watched it happen. The surprise dissolved, and what replaced it was something I recognized, Derek's professional armor, the charm, the confidence, the half-smile. He straightened in his chair, and he began to talk. I will give him credit. He was good. He knew how to present himself. He was polished and experienced, and his answers were technically solid. He spoke about client strategy with fluency, about relationship management with apparent depth. I took notes. I asked follow-up questions, real ones, the ones I ask every executive candidate. Tell me about a time you led a team through a significant setback. What was your decision-making process? How do you approach disagreements with leadership when you believe the strategy is wrong? What does accountability look like in your management style? That last one, I watched his eyes shift, just slightly. He gave a good answer, polished, but there was a half second of something before it, something uncomfortable. I kept going. For 45 minutes, we sat in that conference room and I conducted the most thorough interview of my professional career. I asked every question, I followed every thread. And about halfway through, when he had settled into the rhythm of it, when his confidence had returned fully, he said something. He said, "I have to ask, off the record." I set my pen down. There is no off the record in an interview. He smiled anyway. "Aren't you going to say anything about all of this?" I looked at him across the table. About what specifically? About the fact that we were married? About the fact that I'm sitting in your building? I considered that for a moment. "What would you like me to say, Derek?" He shrugged, the old shrug, the one that always meant he thought the situation was lighter than it was. "I don't know, something. Doesn't this feel strange to you?" And I said, "What feels strange to me is that you applied for an executive position without researching the company's leadership. That's a gap I'd expect from an entry-level candidate, not from someone applying for senior client strategy director." The smile faded. "That's fair," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." I picked up my pen. 2 more questions. When the interview was over, I stood, extended my hand across the table, and shook his. Professional. Clean. "Thank you for your time, Derek. Our team will be in touch within 5 business days." He held my hand for a moment longer than necessary. "For what it's worth," he said, you seem like you're doing really well, Tori." I took my hand back. "I am," I said simply. He nodded. Something in his face, I'm going to be honest with you, looked like grief. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind you carry around when you finally understand the full weight of a decision you made years ago. He picked up his portfolio, walked to the door, and then he paused, turned around one more time. "The thing about your name on the door," he said, "when I saw it in the hallway, before I knew you were already in here, He stopped, shook his head. I laughed, out of shock, just couldn't believe it. He looked at me for a long moment. "I'm not laughing now." And he left. I stood in that conference room alone for a moment, looked out at the lake, and I thought, yeah, I know you're not. 2 days later, I called Dana into my office. I had reviewed Derek's interview scores, his full application packet, his references, and everything our 3-stage process had produced. I had thought carefully about it. I had been honest with myself through the whole thing. "What are you going to do?" Dana asked. She was sitting across from me with her coffee, watching me the way she always does, like she already knows what I'm going to say and is waiting to see if I'm going to say it. "He's qualified," I said, "technically. His scores are above the threshold. His experience is relevant. But he's not right for this company." Dana tilted her head. "Not because of our history," I clarified. "I want to be honest about that because I've examined it carefully. It's not about what happened between us personally." "Then what is it?" I thought about those interview questions, about the half second before his answer on accountability, about the 3 positions in 4 years, about the application submitted to a company whose leadership he hadn't researched, about the way he leaned back in that chair when his confidence returned, the ease of someone who had never had to claw for anything. "He's a person who is very talented at positioning himself," I said, "and that can be valuable in some environments. But what I'm building here requires something more. It requires people who do the work when no one's watching, people who own their mistakes at full volume, people who are hungry in a way that has nothing to do with recognition. I paused. Derek is good at the shortcut. He always has been. I need builders. Dana looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled, small and certain. I'll send the decision letter, she said. I have told this story a handful of times. To Dana, to my therapist, to my mother, who laughed so hard she had to put the phone down and walk around. Every time I tell it, someone asks me the same question. Did it feel like revenge? And every time my answer is the same. No. Revenge would have required me to still be in pain. Revenge would have meant I needed something from Derek, his recognition, his regret, his reaction, to feel complete. I did not need any of those things. What happened in Conference Room B was not revenge. It was documentation. It was sitting across from the person who looked at everything I was and decided it wasn't enough, and letting him see, in full, exactly what wasn't enough had become. That wasn't for him. That was for me. That was for the version of me who sat on a bathroom floor in October and cried into a towel and then got up. That was for the version of me who scaled back her dreams to preserve a marriage that was already quietly ending. That was for the version of me who apologized for being ambitious, who made herself smaller, who poured champagne alone on a night that should have been celebrated. I needed that room, that table, those 45 minutes, not to wound him, to close the chapter. He is opinionated and hilarious and terrifyingly smart, and he builds things. Lego cities, cardboard contraptions, little inventions in his bedroom that have no practical purpose and are completely magnificent. He gets that from me, I'm almost certain. Derek and I co-parent reasonably well. We're civil. We keep our exchanges focused on Mason. It works because we both love that boy with everything we have, and that has never been in question. Ashley is still in the picture. I have made my peace with that. She seems to be kind to my son, and that is what matters. Everything else is not my chapter anymore. My company is entering its 4th year of operation as a restructured entity. We are projecting $14 million in revenue by year's end. I am in preliminary conversations about a second location. I start every morning with 3 miles along the lake. I have a good therapist, a great best friend, a brilliant son, and a brass nameplate on a door on the 32nd floor. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, when I'm walking that hallway in the morning before anyone else arrives, and the city is still quiet and the lake is flat and gray and beautiful through the windows, I stop at my own door. And I read my name, Victoria Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer. And I think about that bathroom floor. And I think about how long it took to get from there to here. And I think every second of it was worth it.